episode 123 of the Sunday Stoic Podcast.
Wisdom,
Prudentia,
justice,
Justitia,
temperance,
Temperantia,
courage.
Fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Welcome to the Sunday Stoic Podcast. This is Steve, coming to you from my closet studio in Conway, Arkansas. This is a podcast where we apply ancient philosophy to modern life. We want to live a good life. We want to take each day and treat it as if it were an entire life. We want to have a good beginning, middle, and end to each day. And when you stitch that all together, it makes for a good life in its entirety. This week, we are switching to the readings of Marcus Aurelius. We went through Epictetus. Now we're going to do a week or two, a couple weeks with Marcus Aurelius before we go back to combining the Stoics together again. Now, we had an introduction to Marcus Aurelius a few weeks ago with Donald Robertson, so you can check that episode out. So today, I'm going to start with just a short reading from Chapter 1 of the Meditations. This is where Marcus goes through and thinks about his mentors, those that meant something to him and what they did to either improve his character or what they did for him that made life possible for him. So we'll just hear a few of those, and then I'm going to go through and do the same thing in my own way for Mother's Day. The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, read on the Stoic Reader app for Android. Book 1. From my grandfather Verus, I learned good morals and the government of my temper. From the reputation and remembrance of my father, modesty and a manly character. From my mother, piety and beneficence and abstinence, not only from evil deeds, but from even evil thoughts. And further simplicity in my way of living, far removed from the habits of the rich. From my great-grandfather, not to have frequented public schools, and to have had good teachers at home, and to know that on such things a man should spend liberally. From Fronto I learned to observe what envy and duplicity and hypocrisy are in a tyrant, and that generally those among us who are called patricians are rather deficient in paternal affection. So I didn't read through all of Chapter 1 of the Meditations, but he goes on and on thanking folks for, a lot of it is about character, and some of it is about like sending him to the right schools and showing him what to value and all that kind of stuff. I thought that since today, at least where I am, is Mother's Day, that it would be a good time to do the same thing for the women that have shaped me through my life. And you might want to think about the same things. So I'm going to ramble on just briefly here, but I have a list of some of the women that have really meant a lot to me. So first, let's start with Mother, my mom. Hi, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. For the gift of life and your example of love, strength, and virtue. There have been a lot of lives changed at my parents' house. My mom grew up in what I would call a poor working class home with several kids, okay? So they didn't have a lot. And my parents didn't go to college, and they had me in their early 20s. So they've been working their butts off since high school, raising a family, my brother and I, keeping a roof over our heads, keeping us fed, even though I didn't know this, but we went through some hard times when I was a kid. And I never knew. I was too young to see how stressed they were. Even though my parents would never be considered rich, they are always sharing. And my mom is the beacon and the example of this. I can think of friends, for example, my brother. I've had some friends that fall into this realm. And more recently, my brother, he's a little younger than me. Friends who had families that were less than family oriented. So perhaps divorced parents or parents that just didn't spend much time with their children. Now, these friends would often show up unannounced and often right at dinner time. And somehow my mom fed them and we had plenty to eat, no problems. Like it was almost like she knew they would show up. She'd also bring clothes and food to people that she knew of in need. She's just a wonderful person. And she's the best mom I could ever ask for. She's fierce when she needs to be, loving, caring, and an amazing woman. I can, like I said, going back to that example, I can think of times when a friend would come over and we'd say, "Hey, it's your birthday. What'd you do today?" And I'd say, "Oh, my parents were at work," or they just said happy birthday. And my mom would walk out with a cake with candles on it, and she was a mom to people who wanted a little more of the traditional experience, I guess, that they were longing for. She's an amazing woman, and I would say to my listeners out there, if you need a mom to wish a happy Mother's Day to, shoot me an email, sundaystoic@gmail.com, and I'll forward it to my mom. She's still working today. She's hopefully going to retire sometime, but she delivers the mail now, and she's always out in the weather. She's a tough one. My mom's tough. How's that? And then her mom, my grandma Wenning. She taught me thrift, humor, and a deep love of family. When I was old enough to know my grandma, they had sold their regular house and they lived in a mobile home with my grandpa. My grandma and grandpa lived together there, and they didn't have much. And they never asked for much. At Christmas, they would get like denture cream, and they were excited to get it. And they never had much to give us, so we get like $1. They had a lot of grandkids. We get like a couple bucks for Christmas, maybe. And that didn't matter because their love was immense. Grandma was full of love, and she'd, you go visit her and get all kinds of hugs, and she'd give you crap too. My mom got some of her toughness from her mama. She'd whack you with her cane if she needed to, but she was an awesome woman. She was a nurse in the 1940s. She even tended to some prisoner of war, German prisoners of war at a prisoner of war camp in my hometown, if I remember correctly. But her love was immense, and she showed me how to use humor to make hard times more bearable. And I'll never forget one of the last times I got to spend with her singing "You Are My Sunshine" with my grandma. My grandma Carafit. From her, I got a deep connection to the past and a connection to the old world. She moved to the United States from Czechoslovakia when she was 7 years old. And what's amazing to me is she didn't know her parents. Her parents left right after she was born, moved to the U.S. to raise money to have her brought to the U.S. And she was raised by her grandma, and she didn't know her parents. Or when she got here, she already had a brother and a sister that she had never met. So there she is, 7 or 8 years old, stuck on a boat by herself, no family with her, and she's sent to the United States to meet her family. She's also a tough woman. And she's fiercely proud of her heritage and has taught me a lot. Taught me about my Czech ancestry, and told me about her ancestors. Her father, who was in the Czechoslovak Legion in World War I, and I'll talk about him maybe on a Father's Day episode. And I also love her Czech pastries. But Grandma taught me the love of storytelling, the love of family history, tying myself to the past to see how I connect into that heritage. My Aunt Betty, for caring enough to show me sights I would never have seen on my own. When I was 12, and like I said, my parents didn't have a lot of money, my aunt was more financially better off, and she was going with her family to Yellowstone National Park. And I said, "Oh, that would be so neat to see." And she was kind enough to invite me along. And so I went with her family, and I got to see amazing sights that shaped who I am today, with a love of, help nurture my love of biology, being able to see biology. I grew up in the middle of what I call the corn desert. There's a lake nearby and there's corn, but there's just not a lot of critters. And so I got to see the American West, and that was life-changing. Thank you for your generosity. My Aunt Rose, when I graduated college, well, first of all, when I was a kid, they took me to Florida. I never would have seen the ocean had it not been for Aunt Rose. I've only been to the ocean once since then, and so maybe twice. But Aunt Rose brought me to the ocean with her family. I got to see the ocean. I got to see what a different part of the country was like, and more importantly, when I graduated college, she gave me a room in her house to live in while I got my feet on the ground and started my first job as an environmental consultant in Dayton, Ohio. And I really appreciate that. And I might not have made it to grad school if I hadn't had that, because it gave me the flexibility to quit that job and go to grad school, because I didn't have a commitment to a house or an apartment. And I would have been making more money if I'd stayed at that job, but I am happier that I was able to be more flexible. And there's not a lot of families out there that would have given a nephew a place to live, and I really appreciate that. To my graduate supervisor, Ruth, scientific rigor, belief in my own abilities, and how to be a rock that the sea crashes against. Ruth is an amazing woman. I call her Mama. She became a botanist when there were virtually no women in the field. And I don't know if she was born with it or if making it in an all-boys club gave her a thick skin, but she was a graduate supervisor that other people in the biology department were scared of. I was always kind of proud to have the graduate supervisor that other people were scared to talk to, because she was gruff. She curses like a coal mining sailor. And she's awesome. And she would move mountains for you if you needed her to. She's gruff, and she'll push through barriers, and then she'll also bake you a cake and make sure you get to see the sights. I was 1,000 miles from home in grad school. She'd say, hey, you want to go to the Rockies and see those? Hey, you want to do this? You want to do that? She took care of me. At the same time, she challenged the hell out of me. My neighbor, Eleanor. Eleanor was an old lady that I think she died when I was 8, maybe 10. She lived next door. I used to mow her grass, and she taught me a desire, once again, a love of nature. She taught me a love of nature and a desire to know more about it. I'd see a neat bird, and I'd go to her house, and she'd pull out her bird book, which I proudly have on my shelf now. And we'd figure out what that bird was. We talked a lot about birds. And also, she showed me how to be graceful and forgiving. My lawnmower broke once, and I didn't know it, and I was basically plowing her yard while I mowed. There was a part dragging in the dirt, and so I was putting furrows in her yard, destroying the grass, and then I tried to figure out what was going on, so I turned around. It was like a Mr. Bean episode. I turned around the lawnmower around to see what was wrong, which just made it worse. I started plowing circles in her yard, and she paid me anyway, but I was forced to by my dad to do the right thing, to go over there and apologize to her. And she said, if it's okay with your dad, I'll still pay you. And so she was a sweet lady, and one with a love of simple pleasures, bird watching. And lastly, my wife. She's full of love, faithfulness, humor, and making each day worth getting up for. She's deeply caring, creative, and nurturing. I only hope I can become a better husband to give her more freedom to be creative, because we're so bogged down with keeping this house standing and our child alive, and I feel like a lot of men, I don't do enough. And I'm proud to be your husband, and my son is lucky to have her as a mama. And I hope I can find more ways to show her that each and every day. I'm a lucky dude. So that's my list. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. We couldn't do it without you. And we love you. Carpe diem. Before I end the show, I want to let you know about a product coming out called the Arete Planner. It's a daily Stoic planner to help you focus your life and practice excellence. Arete. And it's up on Kickstarter, and I will put a link to it in the podcast description.
Thank you for listening to The Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review The Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com or by leaving a voicemail at 501-503-3132. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, Carpe Diem.